This is the Startup Still Say podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Do us a favor, like, subscribe on YouTube or LinkedIn, and be sure to give us your feedback. Hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Welcome to a brand new episode of Startups Dil Se. As always, I'm your host, Anthony Prakash. And today I am joined by a very special guest, Earnest Sweat. He's joining me from not too far from here in the Bay Area. We'll jump into why Ernest is here, his mission, and what he is doing very shortly. But before that, I wanted to welcome you all to the 25th edition of Startups Dil Se. It's a very special episode. And I'm so glad that Ernest has agreed to be as a guest on this particular podcast. I also want to thank all of my previous guests who've been on this podcast. It's almost 10 months since I started this, and little did I imagine I'll get to 25th episode. So thanks to all of you for your tremendous support. Ernest, welcome to Startups Dil Se.
Thank you for having me, Anthony. I am honored to be your 25th guest. And as a fellow podcaster, I think people outside of podcasting world don't understand how big of an achievement that is. I can't remember what the stat is, but I believe around 90% of podcasts fail or they cease to make a new episode after episode 10. So you're in rare air, but it's about consistency and keep going.
Yeah, thank you for that, Ernest. I didn't know that statistic. I mean, for me, it's just been so much fun doing this and just getting to learn from people like you. So why don't we just start with a little bit of background in your own words about yourself? I know you wear a variety of hats, the number of hats I can't even imagine, but maybe you just talk to people about currently, I know literally you're wearing one, but I mean, in earnest, you're wearing so many others. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So I grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas. I always start there because I built a lot of the kind of values and approach to life that I have, not just because of the place, but more importantly, like my two pillars are my parents. And so my father was a computer comp sci grad who then went to work for the state and be the director of IT for their workforce development agency. And on top of that, people all talk about the hats that I wear. He was also a full-time pastor. So that whole being able to balancing act, and you can be a full person, even though as humans, we always try to box people in just so we can take on all the information. He was living proof of that and inspiration. And then my mother, who in her own right, just phenomenal person, she has always been an educator. And so she taught in public schools in Little Rock for about 40 years, half of that being in PE. And then around when I started going to high school, about to go to college, she went back to school and then became a science teacher in middle school. And so those choices of theirs really put an imprint on me and my sister. Is you want something where you can earn a living, but also be able to constantly feed your desire to learn, which they had to do in their careers. And then the cherry on top is if you can find something where you're using those learnings to literally invest in other people's success. And so they did that as teachers, preachers, government workers. And when I actually found venture, I was like, all right, this is a through line to kind of what our Sweat mantra is.
Beautiful story. I mean, it's amazing how many of us get so inspired by our parents. A lot of people, I mean, even my friends, their dads are doctors, they end up being a doctor. The mom's a teacher, they end up being a teacher or a nurse. I mean, during our childhood, we don't realize it, but over a period of time, I mean, we realize that it's in our DNA. That's our mission in life as well. I mean, so beautiful story there, Ernest. Since Little Rock and, your college, and I've seen that you've been a consultant in a financial services firm. You were a founder by yourself, and what you're trying to do to pave the way for the next generation of founders. So I know it's a long and arduous journey, I'm sure, right? I mean, you've had a lot of fun along the way to realize saying, okay, I'm Ernest. This is my mission in life to go help the next generation of founders, do my own fund, if you will. Talk to us a little bit about, how did you come to the realization that this is what was your calling, at least from a professional perspective, from where you were? I mean, you obviously took your first job, I guess, that came right out of college, and
Yeah.
where you were. Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, like most people, I like finding your, and I put them one in the same. I think your vocation can be a purpose and calling that helps be kind of the catalyst to other things that you're passionate about, or your influence, or even just your responsibility as somebody with talent, time, and resources. And so for me, finding venture, it wasn't until, of all places, New Delhi, India, where I found I was like, oh, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So to not bury the lead, had experience as an equity research analyst, then a failed founder in the world of kind of like future of work and ed tech. And that experience in sunsetting that company led me to go to business school at Kellogg in the Chicagoland area. And I had every intention kind of to either kick the can down the road and just be like a management consultant, or if I was lucky enough, find a startup to be the first, second, or third business hire for them. And I came across this opportunity through Kellogg to work at a international venture firm and be placed there for the summer. And so I applied, I got in, and I was placed in New Delhi for an organization called Central Square, which had a venture firm under the umbrella organization. And I got placed in New Delhi, India. And so that experience, despite in the summer it being 117 degrees Fahrenheit, it was a blast. I loved it. I saw how I could take my experience from equity research and apply it to the private markets. And just the things, everything I've been missing at other career stops, it answered, right? Having the ability to talk to a ton of people, having the ability to thesis build, and then putting skin in the game had everything that I wanted. And so that's what really motivated me I had every intention to move back to New York after business school, but that gave me the inspiration. I was like, hey, maybe I should probably look out to the Bay Area. So that's what brought me out to the Bay, made me kind of like zero into venture.
Got it. Along the way, you said, Ernest, that you were a failed founder as well. And I'm pretty sure you maybe think about it, learnings from it, whatnot. And then, I mean, you obviously talk to a lot of founders today, whether it's just to consult with them or as part of your VC role, if you will. What are the sort of learnings that you got being a founder that, I mean, might have formed your principles on, okay, I mean, here are some of the pain points founders go through. How can I help circumnavigate some of those things in today's world?
Anthony, that's a great question, because one thing I've always looked for, but I'm really looking for now in founders is their ability and their team's ability to have learning velocity. And what I mean from that is like, when they get information from the market that might be a hidden insight, or what if they get like smacked in the face from competition or a mistake with a customer, they're able to take that learning and quickly iterate on it to then get escape velocity as fast as possible. And so being able to always take information, figure out what to do next, move, I needed to apply in my own life as well. So without that framework in mind, I came across it. But when it looks back at like, hey, my company failed because I picked a really tough go-to-market motion trying to sell through universities or through municipalities. And second, kind of like a compounding mistake together, is if you're going to choose that path, you need to have advisors who can help you skip steps. And I didn't do that. And so ironically enough, as I became a venture capitalist and joined a corporate VC out here as my first kind of stint as a full-time venture capitalist, I really got good at like helping companies with go-to-market, helping companies find the advisors that could help them find strategic partners or customers. And I just leveraged the hell out of my opportunity working at a large real estate company that was in the intersection of logistics and real estate and commerce, and not just leverage their brands, but really dug in and got my own relationships through that organization that could help my portfolio companies and help companies that weren't even my portfolio companies, but were from founders that I respected or that I was trying to convince to take my money.
Got it. Yeah. Beautiful. I mean, as to how little things in life impact us in the long run. And then, you think back and say, I had that aha moment from when I was a founder. How do I ensure that these 10 people ahead of me who are taking my money and my people who are investing in me, apply it the right way.
Yeah.
So as a would call yourself a VC right now, even though you're looking forward to building Stresswood
Oh
in
yeah,
2027?
I'm
Yeah,
still investing right now.
yeah, perfect. Yeah, so we'll talk about Stresswood in a little bit and your vision for that and everything. But when you invest in a startup, if you will, Ernest, right? I mean, how much of it is pure research, numbers, and the TAM and the projections and whatnot versus your gut feel as a person, with whom you're talking to sitting on the other side of the table? I mean, do you give that any weightage at all from just your individual perspective?
Yeah, it's an asset class that is more of a balance between science and art than others. And based on how early you invest, it's going to be more art than science because there aren't any real numbers to dig into. It's just assumptions.
Yeah,
And so for me, because I'm a Series A and Series B investor, there's a little bit more data, but what you're trying to determine is like what's repeatable and what
yeah,
has the opportunity to actually have what you're underwriting against. Does this team have the opportunity to do something special and unique and have a venture backable exit? And
yeah,
so a lot of that, and this is even before you join the board, invest, a lot of that is determining is like, hey, I see these numbers like, all right, what have you learned? What's the learning velocity there? Like, what have you learned? What are you going to exploit because of that? What's going on in the market that might influence you? How's that going to, contribute or restrict your product roadmap? But then the other piece is just like, who are you as a person? What motivates you? What does success look like for you? And then how
yeah,
have you been able to, do those things I wasn't able to do as a founder, but like build a strong team around you of both employees and advisors that give you a competitive advantage. And that really speaks to today's time and opportunity, right? Like your question, Anthony, in the beginning kind of like felt like it was a great question and normal question, but what underlined is like, hey, what frameworks are you using, Ernest? And I am
exactly.
in a stage now where you have to question every framework, even stuff that made you successful in the past. You have to
Yeah,
question every paradigm because we are at a point in history, whether we're talking about venture capital or all the way to politics or economics to healthcare to every function, every industry. We're at a time of change where one world is dying and the other world is emerging. And so what you need to do is see with like, I don't know who said this quote, but people always talk about history doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes. You need to understand what's the rhyme scheme. What are the invisible truths that are non-consensus today, but will be trends tomorrow? And so for me, even thinking about what's the ideal founder that creates outlier, outcomes, I think that's actively changing too.
got it, got it. Thank you for that. I couldn't have framed it the way you framed the question about the framework. That's what I was alluding to. That's where your VC DNA is kicking in. So you mentioned the move. You went to India. You wanted to be in the Silicon Valley where there's a lot of action from a VC perspective. I mean, do you feel validated in the fact that you chose to be here? And the second part to that question, Ernest, is, I mean, how has Silicon Valley changed you as a VC? I mean, maybe you wouldn't have done certain things, if you were probably not looking at the teen number of VCs out here. And of course, the founders are flocking here, especially in today's world with AI. I mean, just as a person, right? I mean, how has Silicon Valley influenced you?
Wow, that's such a deep question and a great question. First I'll start with the first question of do I feel validated? I think it's preferences. Life is about preferences. And so for me, I had a friend who recently reconnected from like college. We didn't go to the same school, but we were admitted to the same school in high school and then just kind of kept in touch. And, she told me, she was like, you've always been a kind of big city person. And so even though I grew up in Little Rock, it's like, all right, yeah, I went to New York next and then, went to Chicago and now I've been in the Bay Area. They're all different in different ways, but I think it just
Yeah,
speaks to kind of like my preference. And, as somebody who's always had to code switch and, society, regionally, whatever. My ability, I've always been kind of like I read this book last year called Range, which speaks about how like generalists will win in a specialized world. And there's one section about just like how Charles Darwin would always journal and talk to as many experts as possible. And the researcher called him a professional outsider. So he always would take in new ideas to like iterate on his own views, but he always appreciated doing both, the both like internal debate as well as like talking to people who focus it on it the best. You know, instead of just being like a big city person, I think that's what I aspire to. Like, I love meeting new people. And this is why this job is a perfect fit for me and asset class is the right fit for me, is I'm paid to ask questions and meet people who are thinking big. Like, that's literally all. And so, for me, the second question about like what it's done to me, I think it's just like what was already there. It kind of just made it more prevalent and made me think of like how my career can be aligned with kind of how I view the world, things I really appreciate, and this idea of kind of truth, and it's always changing. So I don't know if that answers your question, but like,
I think it does. I mean, the way I interpret it is, I mean, you know, with the different moves that you said you did, I mean, it kind of showed your mental preference to where you wanted to be. Like you said, you know, it suits the fact that you want to talk to a lot of people. I mean, if you're in a small city, yes, you can do it with Zoom and whatnot, but I mean, it's not like meeting people in person like in a big city, part one.
Yeah.
And again, I also think, I mean, the way I understood what you said is that it also has brought kind of the best out of you because it kind of resonates with the energy of the place as well, right? I mean, which is more that founder mentality and that VC mentality. And the more like-minded people you meet, I mean, it kind of reiterates that is how I read it.
Can I say like a follow-up to that? Like,
yeah, please.
I'm an optimistic realist as well, though. Like, it's not perfect. It's far from perfect. It's a lot of problems being in Silicon Valley, especially when you look at just like how the lack of inclusivity there actually is, and how being like a baron of risk rewards certain people and won't reward everybody, right? Or even my industry has gotten wider and meller over the last even 5 years. And so it's not perfect. And even like, I feel like I'm in a better place now here. I've always liked it, but like realizing it's unlike like that New York mentality of like, hey, there are steps to success. I had to deprogram myself from that and take the best from that of just like, all right, I can make it anywhere, but also incorporate my Southern ability to sometimes be so naive and my ability to like feel like I can connect to anyone, but more importantly, being able to genuinely disarm people in a way that makes them feel comfortable, and how we can co-collaborate successfully. So it's not perfect, and you can be successful a lot of different ways, but you have to break the idea of I need to follow a playbook. Because if you ask ChatGPT or Sora or Anodali, I guess, to make a picture of a typical VC, it's not going to look like me. And so given that, I shouldn't follow a playbook that's set up for them. That honestly, even for somebody who does look like that, if they're from a different generation, like that's still not going to work because things are actively moving.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ernest, about inclusivity and how people look at us. And you know, and I think, I mean, to your point on the playbook aspect as well, I mean, you know, just the mentality of the different places. And I can also tie to, as you were saying, I was thinking about the learning aspect that you mentioned about founders, you know, how you adapt to the different changes and how you can help you supercharge escape velocity and all of that. I'm also a firm believer in lifelong learning. You know, unless you have that mindset, you're just not going to grow, you know, I mean, because the world is changing so fast. And I've also realized sometimes the hard way, you also have to unlearn some things as fast as possible if you think that's not good for you. So as much as learning is important, I always tell this to my daughter as well. I mean, whether it's bad habits, right?
Yeah.
Unlearning is as important in life as learning, but you need to know what to unlearn and what's good for you.
Absolutely.
So part of what you said, I mean, resonated with me that way because there's a lot of similarities there.
Yeah. It makes me think of this. I was talking to this LP once, who had been at a large endowment of a university in the East Coast. And he said he always expected great fund managers to take 60% of his advice and know what 40% wasn't true or didn't serve him well. My first response was like, wow, you think it's 60%? Wow. Okay. This humble guy. But what he was getting at, the gist is like, even well thought out advice isn't always applicable to you. You know what's inside. And even this journey of a podcast, like, it's been kind of like little tidbits and stories like that can show you. Yeah, I had plenty of people who are well-meaning, love me, respect me, think I'm smart, and told me not to do it. And now we're 60 episodes in, and it's one of the most shrewd things I've ever done in my life.
Yeah, beautiful. That great segue. I know you have a lot of things in progress, but I mean, everything is kind of aligning towards what do you want to do with Stresswood and all of that. How did all that come to your head, and how did you put that vision together to say, okay, I mean, the podcast is going to help me with this. I know you launched something called Groundwork, which is not really blogging or not really, write-ups and whatnot. But I mean, I think you mentioned it as well. It's not a resume. It's not this. It's not that. But I mean, you have a certain vision for it. Can you paint a picture in what was in your head when you kind of put that all together? I mean, I felt like, I mean, there's a lot of thought gone into that for you to come up with that, because I mean, eventually, I mean, it looks beautiful, but I mean, you probably thought about it for many months, many years before you came up with that.
Yeah, I would like to say I did, but it kind of like, I won't say it happened over time, but there's been a lot of thought in it, but it's not always going to be as sequential as you think. So like, honestly, the podcast came, first, and it was a time and period when I was looking to transition it out of my venture firm and knew I wanted to stay in the venture, but like, what was that going to look like? Was I going to join at a level below that I was at? Was I going to to have a seat, work in something or a vertical that maybe I didn't feel like I was equipped for, or actually maybe didn't even believe in? And so after a lot of conversations and speaking to Alexa, that's my co-host for Swimming with Allocators, we were having similar stories. And she said, and we were having conversations with LPs separately. And we both came to this like idea of like, hey, this would be great to share these conversations, because I'm learning from your conversations as you tell me, and you're learning from mine. And when she came up with the name, it was just like, we got to do that. Even if we suck and don't do more than 3 episodes, that name is something we have to try. And so that gave me the idea of like, all right, just putting myself out there and learning from other people, and then we'll see what comes from it. And it gives me kind of a Trojan horse to developing relationships that will last me the next 20, 30 years. And then I was actually the name Stresswood came from one of the interviews of, I knew I wanted to start a firm, but I didn't know what the name would be. And I've written about this, and it's in Groundwork. And so people can go, I can share the link that other people can see, but another conversation helped start something that then helped me go to work. And so this balance again of like that I got in equity research is like, yeah, you can be an individual contributor and come up with something, but ideas come from like other people, other ideas, and then you put your flavor on it, or you take analogies from outside of your own industry and apply it to it, and you'll have breakthroughs. So once I always had the North Star. I was like, all right, looks like I'm about to start a firm. Okay, great. I got a name. Names make things real. Like, the story in the Christian Bible is just like, and also the Jewish faith, the Torah is like, oh, when Adam is naming things, now they're realer for some reason. They were still there, but like it makes them realer. And so now the way I'm thinking is like, all right, I got this North Star. I want to launch fundraising this period in 2 years. Now what I need to do in the meantime, in between, to actually best position myself. And so that's how I kind of use the things that I was doing, using insights to have kind of like these different pillars. And the podcast is a part of that.
Yeah, beautiful. I mean, the part you said about the name part of it is so true for me as well when I started my podcast, because I had the idea for 6 months to do something like this, because I've always been so interested in talking to people, learning from them, especially the founders and that ecosystem. But once I came up with a name, and just like you, I mean, I was driving somewhere, I connected two things and said, this is the name for my podcast. And then within 2 weeks, I had my first guest.
That's awesome.
So it is so true what you said. I mean, I can totally resonate with that part. So how would you differentiate yourself with the firm you're trying to build with Stresswood, Ernest? I mean, again, based off of the learnings and your upbringing and your values and everything. I mean, what is your vision for Stresswood?
Yeah, well, that concept is one in nature, and it essentially, like, what it is trees have natural stressors like wind, rain, heat, ice, whatever. And those natural stressors create a certain type of wood and bark that helps them sustain themselves with more stressors, as well as they get bigger and bigger, they can hold their own weight. And Sarah Samuels, who is from NEPC, when we were interviewing, she spoke about this, and then she told a juxtaposition, like juxtaposed it to this experiment in the late 80s, early 90s called Biosphere 2, which was like in Arizona, this dome, and was supposed to be like, oh, best thing for any vegetation, no stressors, no wind. And what happened is the trees shot up, but then they fell over on themselves because they didn't have this certain type of wood and bark that built up resilience and made them stronger. And so that was just like a light bulb to me of like, as we enter, leave the era of growth at all costs and enter an exciting opportunity, but equally as humans do, if you overdo it in moderation, the proficiency at all costs or productivity at all costs with AI and automation, you need certain type of founders to be able to navigate those changes. It was enough when like the market and macro stayed pretty similar, or was always up and to the right. But now so much is changing from a macro climate to demographic factors. And so you need founders who have resilience, learning velocity, and discernment of how to make decisions and how to build teams. And so what you need is this great combination of human plus machines, and building a firm that lives through that, applies that, is going to be critical. And so for us, it's really about the team of investors, right? And there's been questions on like, do VCs actually have that much impact? And I agree with folks like that. Like, if we want an analogy, is like I'm more Quincy Jones than Michael Jackson, right? The founder is going to be Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
But in the little bit that you can do of a suggestion of like, hey, what if that song went like this? Or what if we limited to only 10 songs versus 14 and stuff like that? That could prove out to be strong dividends. So we really want to test this idea of like, what do network effects look like? And I think it's a combination of having a team that is truly aligned, which doesn't usually happen in venture capital, and one in which that is a group of professional outsiders. So people who are able to gather those hidden insights that AI can't get and find what's non-consensus today that will be consensus later, to help bridge worlds for the firm as well as their portfolio founders.
Okay. Beautiful, Ernest. I love the story, love the vision. I'm going to be cheering for you and everybody at Stresswood as that comes to life. Before we wrap up, I also want to do everything that you've seen in this world. I mean, both from a personal perspective, all the founders you've met, being a founder who started and failed, and then where your journey are on. Any core principles or advice that you would give to upcoming founders?
I think, and this goes to investors as well, and literally almost anybody, be clear on your why, and if your why matches up with what your North Star is. So for founders, is it like, what type of business do you want to create? Why? Being self-aware on like, what type of product type is that and why? And not just going to being weather vanes on like creating, oh, AI is hot, that'll help me get funded, instead of like, no, this is really a problem I want to solve. I believe I'm equipped to solve it like no one else, and hit a certain mark of exit and success that is appealing not only to that's appealing to me as well as my team. Not because I think the buy side of whatever market that I'm selling is that's what they're into, because that can be fleeting. And what we see now is a lot of growth companies that are in between kind of two different markets, and now trying to shift again or figure out what they want to be. So that why is important. And then for the investors, is like, why do you want to be a venture capitalist? Is venture the right asset class for you? Because it's more of an art than like lower market PE. And so are you an artist? Are you an architect? Or are you an executor? And let me not like you have to execute as a fund manager in venture, but it's a little bit different than kind of like the kind of, the digits and kind of like the financial statements of one asset class, and more if you're looking at like being a coach, being a motivator, diligencing people, which is more soft.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Ernest. I mean, I couldn't have said it better. Your experience really comes through in everything you talk about. I mean, and your thoughts are like so well thought through. So I couldn't thank you enough for being on my podcast today, and wish you the very best, Ernest. Thanks so much again.
Thank you, Anthony. I appreciate you. This is a huge achievement, and continue going.
Thank you very much, Ernest. Take care.